You might have already seen our detailed range coverage of this, the new Ford Ranger 2023 model, but in this review we're focusing on this particular model. It's the Ranger Wildtrak V6 four-wheel drive. And get ready because this review is going to cover off a lot, from practicality to daily driving to fuel consumption, even a caravan towing test, and I've roped in Crafty for some serious off-roading.
Yeah, you're spot on, Matt. I'm going to put this Ranger through its paces in the Aussie bush to see how it goes. You can skip ahead if you want to get straight to that, but I reckon you should stick around because Matt's got some important information that I reckon you'll want to know.
Remember, you can read my full detailed Wildtrak review if you hit the link in the description below. You'll also find Byron's range review coverage down there too, and we've got plenty more Ranger stuff at the CarsGuide website, so make sure you check it out. Now, let's get to it. The Ranger Wildtrak is the top of the pops when it comes to the standard Ranger lineup. There's the Raptor above it, but it's a pretty different beast. The Wildtrak is only available with four-wheel drive as a dual cab and with the pickup body style. If you want to save a few grand, you can choose the carryover bi-turbo 4-cylinder engine, but we all know you want the V6, which lists at just over 70 grand at the time of filming. Some of the neat features include an electronic roll-top cargo cover, 18-inch alloy wheels with all-terrain tyres, a 12-inch portrait media screen with sat-nav, digital instruments, and a clever integrated brake controller. More on that in the towing section. If you've sat in or owned the last generation Wildtrak, then you're going to feel like you're at home, but also in an unfamiliar place when you sit in the new generation model. And that's because there are plenty of touch points and elements like the orange stitching on the seats, the dark headlining, which I don't necessarily love, and also the materials that have been used, which all sort of feel like the last Wildtrak. But then there's this massive 12-inch screen. Now, it's not only in the Wildtrak, you can get it in other models in the Ranger lineup, but it does make interacting with the car a very different experience to the old 8-inch sync screen that we had in the last generation model. Now, that's not to say that it's bad, but it is very different and it takes some getting used to. For instance, there are basically two screens that are stacked on top of each other, and you have to use the screen a lot. Like, yeah, there are controls down here for volume and air conditioning and fan speed, which is all great. I really appreciate the fact that those buttons and knobs and dials exist, because so many other utes and vehicles these days are just going full touchscreen. Thankfully, Ford decided against that, which is great, but there's also duplication there. So above that is basically all the same controls just on the screen, which is a bit weird. And a lot of your attention is drawn to the bottom of the screen for controls. And that means that you are taking your eyes further away from the road if you're not as familiar with the screen as you might get over time. So the screen, for me, is interesting, but not necessarily perfect. And I prefer personally a horizontal layout or a landscape layout screen rather than a portrait, but there's nothing I can do about that. So what else is there to talk about for the interior? Well, a fully digital instrument cluster is one thing. It's configurable to a degree and there's a lot of information available on the screen, but there's also heaps and heaps of warnings that pop up and there's dings and bings and bongs. It can get frustrating because sometimes you just want to look at a screen without all these little things popping up, even if you're just sitting still in the car like I am right now. There's a pair of pop-out cup holders at the edges of the dash, which is great. You've got these cup holders between the seats as well. There's a decent little storage nook in front of the shifter, and there's a wireless charging point there as well. Bottle holders in the doors, a decent sized center cubby here as well, and sunglass holder up ahead. Now, Ford's made a big deal about this shifter. I think it's interesting looking, but not necessarily the easiest shifter to use. I don't know why brands insist on changing the way that things work when they weren't broken in the first place, but so it is. I'll get to more of that in the driving section. And also here you'll find the drive mode selector and also your four-wheel drive selector. So you've got 2 high, 4 low, and 4 auto. And when you put it in towing mode, for instance, it'll go to 4 auto for you, which is pretty neat. There's also some off-road mode buttons down here. And generally, that's where you'd expect those sorts of controls to be. One other thing I want to bring up is The door handles, or the lack of door handles on the door, it's actually a little lever that you have to pull inside the door pull itself, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. All told, I think the interior of this new generation Wildtrak up front is pretty impressive. So, how about the back? There's nothing dramatically different about the backseat experience of the new generation Ranger compared to the last one. It's still about the same amount of space as before. I'm 6 foot or 182 centimeters. This seat is set for me. I've got just enough knee room, a little bit of foot room, but not too much. A little bit of headroom, but not too much, and 3 across, it might be a bit of a squeeze. Now there are ISOFIX child seat anchor points on the window seats, and a couple of top tethers as well to use if you do have children. They'll also appreciate the fact that there are directional air vents in this generation Ranger, which is fantastic. And there's also a couple of USB ports, a USB-C and a USB-A, which is good for keeping things charged up. In terms of storage, you've got a couple of mat pockets on the backs of the seats. There's bottle holders in the doors, and there's a flip down armrest with cup holders in there too, which is pretty neat. So all told, not bad, but not setting any new benchmarks. Here are the dimensions and details of the dual cab pickup tub for the new Ranger. It is competitive in terms of length, width and depth, but doesn't set any new standards apart from the fact that you can fit a pallet between the wheel arches, which you used to be able to do in the Amarok anyway. If you want more detail, head to our detailed story at the CarsGuide site. You'll find a link in the description below. Already told you we've got the V6, but here's what you need to know. This engine is a 3-litre turbo diesel V6, and it pumps out a huge 184 kilowatts and 600 newton meters. That's more than any 4-cylinder ute out there, and in fact a fair bit more than the 4-cylinder Ranger Wildtrak that you can get for $3,000 less. Transmission, there's only one choice available, a 10-speed automatic. If you choose the 4-cylinder Wildtrak, you get selectable 4-wheel drive, but the V6 Wildtrak also has a 4-wheel drive auto system, so for permanent 4-wheel drive on the road. And you can see Crafty get to grips with that 4-wheel drive system off-road in the off-road section of this video. A V6 engine in a ute like this is always going to be a recipe for success. Like Volkswagen has had huge success with the Amarok V6, so Ford can expect to have, well, even more success, you would think. I mean, Ford has been one of the best-selling ute makers in Australia for a decade or so, and adding something like this big 3-litre turbo diesel V6 is only going to make it more popular with customers, especially when the Hilux doesn't offer anything like this just yet. So, is it a good engine? Yeah, it's pretty damn good. There's great linear power delivery, and the 10-speed automatic really does a good job of harnessing that power and giving you the gear that you need when you need it. So it doesn't necessarily jump around between gears as much as you might think it would, especially having 10 gears to play with. But having said that, you can take matters into your own hands if you really want to. I've found the manual shift action to be just a bit annoying though, because it's a toggle thing and there's no paddle shifters. I mean, some people might think paddle shifters on a ute is a bit silly, but honestly, they'd be welcome in this application. So what about the other on-road attributes of this Ranger Wildtrak V6? Well, the ride is mostly pretty comfortable. I wouldn't say that it's perfect, but it's pretty good for a ladder frame chassis ute like this. It's comfortable enough, it deals well with bumps and lumps in the road surface, and it doesn't get too upset by potholes either. The last generation Ranger set the benchmark for steering, and this new one, well, it's just as good. It does have a little bit less feel than some other utes out there. You're not necessarily feeling everything that happens at the tires, at the front axle, but it's light and it's accurate, and thankfully it's still really easy to turn this vehicle. Even though it does have a big turning circle, remember it's a ute after all, it's pretty easy to deal with. Another thing that I think is too soft as well is the brake pedal. The top of the pedal has this really soft, spongy feel, and it just doesn't feel as reassuring as I wish it did. I just want a bit more bite, especially at the top of the pedal. And the other thing that I really think that separates this new generation Ranger from the last model is how quiet it is inside. It just doesn't have the same level of diesel rattle coming through to the cabin. And this Wildtrak model that we're driving right now, well, honestly, you could be driving a diesel SUV. It's that quiet inside. Really impressive. When it comes to towing, well, it is a pretty good tow truck. We put on this 3-ish ton caravan from our mates at Avida. Thanks again for lending us the van. And it just feels like it's, well, designed to do this job as well as so many other jobs. The Ranger really has a good amount of power delivery to get you out of trouble. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's underpowered at any moment in time when you are towing something that weighs 3 tons. And look, this is a big caravan, nearly 8 and a bit meters long, 2.5 meters wide, 2.5 meters tall. It's big, there's no doubt about that. But it just doesn't feel like it's causing too much of an effect on the Ranger's drive experience. The ride is pretty good still, the steering is nice and accurate still, engine and transmission work together pretty well in most instances, although those who fancy themselves as thinking they're smarter than the 10-speed automatic transmission, think twice, because putting it in manual mode, you might actually find yourself getting a bit confused with what gear you should be in. Whereas if you leave it to its own devices, the 10-speed auto does a really good job. So I've told you what it's like on-road, I've told you what it's like to tow with. Now, here's Crafty to tell you what it's like off-road.
Now obviously you want to know how good this engine is, and the good news is that it is very good. 184 kilowatts and 600 newton meters are produced by this new donk, and it's got a really even-handed application of it, and it works really well with that auto, and that's at pace on fast gravel tracks, but also, especially in this case, at low speed during low range four-wheel driving. And what's also of note in this new Ranger is the fact that it has permanent four-wheel drive, not part-time four-wheel drive like it used to, and part-time four-wheel drive is also the preferred system in a lot of its rivals. But that gives you a little bit of flexibility in terms of drivability of this vehicle. You can drive it in four-wheel drive auto, and that's even on high traction surfaces. What's also impressive in this new Ranger is the fact that you are spoilt for choice in terms of driver assist tech, and a lot of it is focused around the off-road arena. You've got off-road cameras, you've got information systems that will tell you pitch and roll, that's the angle of the vehicle as you go up and over undulating terrain. Now all that's well and good, and I welcome all of it, but you also have to drive with a measured and sustained momentum. And if you can't see something through the off-road camera, which is very good, although I did have problems with the fisheye lens, it might be because I'm an older bloke and my eyes are getting a bit dodgy, but I'd often prefer to stick my head out the window and get a good view of the track, or refer to my spotter, have someone on the track helping you out, helping you pick your line, helping you put the wheels in the right spot so you get through things safely and with plenty of control. And while it is aimed at being much more of an off-road focused ute than plenty of others in the market, it's hamstrung quite substantially by its tyres. They're showroom tyres, but that's an easy fix because you just throw on a set of aggressive all-terrain tyres and that'll solve that problem. As well, suspension, while it's pretty good and smooths out a lot of minor irregularities in the track, it is not ideal for getting plenty of ground clearance or plenty of wheel travel. And the Ranger sits nice and settled on the track, and that's largely due to the fact that it's wider, it's got a wider wheel track, and it does have a longer wheelbase. But that comes with a trade-off. These vehicles feel quite low to the dirt and they feel quite vulnerable to rubbing the belly here and there and on quite innocuous obstacles. I'll give you the drum, but that's another easy fix with a quick solution. You go to the Australian aftermarket and you sort out a suspension lift. So all in all, the Ranger is a very capable off-road vehicle. Nothing is perfect in the ute market. There's always a compromise. This Ranger probably errs on the side of being more of an on-road touring vehicle, a really capable tow vehicle, than it is a hardcore off-roader. But you can certainly use it as a light-duty, medium-duty off-roader, and you won't have any problems once you sort out those tyres and the suspension. This is a pretty decent all-round four-wheel drive.
On your screen, you'll see the official combined cycle fuel consumption figure for the Ranger Wildtrak V6 diesel 4x4. Now, that's a pretty good number for a big ute with a big engine. We did our own combined cycle test on this review, and we saw, well, a slightly higher number, but that's across on-road and off-road testing. And on your screen now, you'll also see our towing test return. And for me, that's pretty good considering we were towing 3 tons. Ford developed the new Ranger with top safety scores in mind, so it is loaded with heaps of advanced safety tech like AEB and lane keeping aids. Our written reviews cover off all the details, but one of the highlights is the Matrix LED optional headlights on this grade, so much better than the dire halogens on the entry-level models. Ford backs the Ranger with a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, which is okay, but certainly not setting any new benchmarks. If you want better, consider the Isuzu D-Max, which has a 7-year warranty, or the Mitsubishi Triton, which comes with a conditional 10-year warranty. Now, servicing is every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, which is good, and service pricing is not too bad either. Ford says you'll pay $329 for the first 4 services, which is certainly less than the existing Amarok V6. So there you have it, a pretty comprehensive take on this new generation Ford Ranger Wildtrak V6. Crafty, are you impressed?
Mate, very impressive off-road. You've got all those mechanicals, all that driver assist tech in a pretty tidy package.
Yep, and tell us what you think in the comments section below. If you agree with what we've said in this review, or if you disagree, we'd love to hear from you. And make sure you stay tuned to the CarsGuide website and our YouTube channel for more great video reviews just like this one.